The dust rose like a veil across the horizon as Willa Parker stood on the weathered porch of what had, until this morning, been her family home. The foreclosure notice crumpled in her trembling hand, her knuckles white against the yellowed paper as the banker's carriage disappeared down the road. Fort Davis, Texas, 1885, a place where promises died as quickly as the parched grass beneath the relentless summer sun. "Madam, you need to vacate the premises by sundown." The bank representative's voice still echoed in her ears, clinical and detached, as if he hadn't just dismantled her entire existence with a stroke of his pen. Willa's father had died 6 months ago, leaving behind a mountain of debt she hadn't known existed. The drought that followed had withered their crops and her hopes simultaneously. At 24, she now stood alone, watching as 2 men nailed boards across the windows of the only home she'd ever known. She turned away, unable to bear the sight any longer. The small bundle of her remaining possessions sat pathetically at her feet: a dress, her mother's silver hairbrush, a photograph, and precisely 47 cents. Not enough for a meal, let alone a future. "Seems like a mighty fine day to be standing around," came a deep voice from behind her. Willa whirled around, hastily wiping tears from her cheeks with the back of her hand. A tall man sat atop a chestnut mare, the afternoon sun at his back casting him in shadow. His hat was pulled low, but she could make out a strong jawline peppered with stubble. "I don't recall asking for your opinion, sir," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. He dismounted in one fluid motion, and as he stepped forward, the sun no longer obscured his features. Isaac Jones. She recognized him now, a cattle driver who occasionally came through Fort Davis with herds bound for the railroad. They'd exchanged pleasantries at the general store once or twice, but nothing more. "Didn't mean to intrude," he said, removing his hat. His dark hair fell across his forehead, and his eyes, a startling blue against his sun-weathered skin, held no pity, only quiet assessment. "Just wondering if you might need assistance." Willa laughed bitterly, gesturing to the house and the land beyond. "Unless you can reverse time or conjure money from thin air, I doubt there's anything you can do." Isaac's gaze swept over the homestead. "Bank took it all, didn't they?" She nodded, swallowing hard against the lump in her throat. "Every last acre, every stick of furniture, every memory." He was quiet for a long moment, just watching her with those unnerving blue eyes. Then he said something that made her heart stutter. "Then we start with everything." Willa blinked. "I beg your pardon." "When you've got nothing," Isaac said, his voice low and sure, "that's when you start with everything. No past weighing you down, no expectations, just possibility." "That's a charming sentiment," Willa replied, "but possibility doesn't put food in one's stomach or a roof over one's head." "No, but this might help with the first part." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a parcel wrapped in brown paper. "I was heading to the boarding house for supper. Care to join me?" Her pride warred with her empty stomach, pride lost. "Why would you help a stranger?" "Who said I'm helping?" A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Maybe I just don't like eating alone." Something in his easy manner disarmed her. "I suppose I could join you just this once." As they walked toward town, Willa carrying her meager bundle and Isaac leading his horse, she felt the weight of the day press down on her. "I don't know what I'm going to do," she admitted. "I have nowhere to go." "Mrs. Sullivan at the boarding house might have a room," Isaac suggested. "And the general store's looking for help. On credit, I doubt Mrs. Sullivan runs a charity." Isaac looked at her sideways. "I've got a proposition for you." Willa stiffened. "If you're suggesting what I think you are," he laughed, the sound unexpectedly warm. "Nothing of the sort, Miss Parker." "I need a partner." "A partner?" She stopped walking. "For what exactly? I've been saving for a cattle operation of my own. Got land about 20 miles east of here near Valentine. Good water, decent grazing. What I don't have is someone to help run it while I'm on drives." Willa narrowed her eyes. "And you're offering this to someone you barely know, someone who knows nothing about cattle ranching. You grew up on a farm, you know hard work," he shrugged. "And you need a fresh start. I'm offering you a job, Miss Parker. Room and board, plus a share of the profits once we get established." "Why me?" Isaac's expression grew serious. "Because when I rode up, you weren't begging or crying for someone to save you. You were standing tall, facing what came. That's the kind of person I want watching my back." She searched his face for any sign of deception but found only earnestness. "I'll consider it," she finally said, resuming their walk into town, "but I make no promises." "That's fair," he nodded. "Take tonight to think it over. I leave at first light tomorrow." The boarding house was a 2-story wooden structure with a wide porch and curtained windows that glowed warm in the approaching dusk. Mrs. Sullivan, a stern-faced widow with surprisingly kind eyes, greeted them at the door. "Isaac Jones, back in town I see," she said, then turned to Willa. "And Miss Parker, I heard about the farm. I'm truly sorry." News traveled fast in Fort Davis. Willa felt her cheeks burn with shame. "Thank you, Mrs. Sullivan. Miss Parker needs a room for the night," Isaac said, placing coins on the small table in the entryway. "And we'd both be grateful for some supper." Mrs. Sullivan eyed the money, then Willa's small bundle. Understanding dawned in her eyes, but she said nothing that might wound Willa's pride further. "Of course. The blue room upstairs is available and dinner will be served shortly." As they settled at the long dining table, Willa noticed how Isaac greeted everyone by name: the blacksmith's apprentice, the elderly schoolteacher, a young mother with 2 small children. He belonged nowhere and everywhere at once, she realized. A drifter with connections. "You travel through often," she observed as Mrs. Sullivan's helper, a freckle-faced girl named Emma, served bowls of hearty stew. 3 or 4 times a year," he confirmed. "Fort Davis is on the route to the railhead in Valentine. And this land of yours, have you worked it yet?" "Started building a cabin last winter. It's rough, but it keeps the rain out. Been planting fence posts when I can. It needs work, but the bones are good." Willa considered his words as she ate. The stew was delicious, the first real meal she'd had in days. "What about cattle?" "You mentioned starting an operation." "Got a small herd. 20 head to start. Not much, but it's something to build on. And you need someone to watch over things while you're away on drives. That seems like a significant responsibility to entrust to a stranger." Isaac wiped his mouth with a napkin. "I'm a decent judge of character, Miss Parker." "Willa," she corrected him. "If we're to be business partners, you might as well use my given name." A smile spread slowly across his face. "Does that mean you're accepting my offer?" She set down her spoon, meeting his gaze directly. "What other options do I have? Stay here and be pitied by everyone who knew my father, become someone's housekeeper or worse?" "Those are reasons to leave, not reasons to come with me," Isaac pointed out. Willa considered this. "You're right." "Very well, I accept your offer because I want a fresh start and because your proposal, while unorthodox, seems honest." "Then it's settled." He extended his hand across the table. "Partners." His palm was calloused against hers, his grip firm but not overbearing. A working man's hand. Trustworthy, she hoped. That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed at the boarding house, Willa stared at the ceiling and wondered if she'd lost her mind. She was agreeing to go off with a man she barely knew, to a place she'd never seen, to start a life she couldn't imagine. Yet the alternative, staying in Fort Davis with nothing, seemed unbearable. Morning came too quickly. She dressed in her one remaining gown, tucked her few possessions into a borrowed carpet bag from Mrs. Sullivan, and descended to the dining room. Isaac was already there, talking quietly with a man Willa recognized as the town's only lawyer, Mr. Peterson. "Ah, Miss Parker," Mr. Peterson greeted her. "Just in time. We've drawn up a simple partnership agreement. Mr. Jones has explained the arrangement to me." Willa's eyebrows rose as she took the seat Isaac pulled out for her. "A formal agreement? I thought it best to make things official," Isaac explained. "Protects us both." She read the document carefully. It outlined exactly what Isaac had proposed: room and board, plus 20% of profits from the ranch once it became profitable. The agreement could be dissolved by either party with 30 days' notice. Her name would be on the deed alongside his, but only after 1 year of successful partnership. "This seems generous," she said cautiously. "It's practical," Isaac countered. "I need help. You need a fresh start. We both benefit." Willa signed the paper, watching as Mr. Peterson witnessed their signatures and made 2 copies. She tucked one into her carpet bag, feeling a curious mix of terror and exhilaration. After a hasty breakfast, they stood on the boarding house porch. Isaac had acquired a second horse, a gentle-eyed mare named Penny. "She's yours now," he told Willa. "Every rancher needs a good horse." Willa stroked the mare's velvety nose, overwhelmed by the gesture. "I can't accept. It's a business expense," Isaac interrupted. "Not a gift. You can't very well work a cattle ranch on foot." She nodded, accepting his explanation. It was easier than acknowledging the kindness behind it. They rode east out of Fort Davis as the sun climbed higher in the clear blue sky. Willa didn't look back at the town, or at the road that would lead north to her former home. There was nothing for her in either direction now. "How long will it take to reach our land?" she asked as they settled into a steady pace. 2 days if the weather holds," Isaac replied. "We'll camp tonight near Olympia Creek." The vastness of the landscape was both daunting and freeing. Rolling hills gave way to open plains, dotted with mesquite and cacti. Birds wheeled overhead, and occasionally they spotted antelope in the distance. By midday, Willa's legs and back ached from the unaccustomed hours in the saddle, but she said nothing. "We'll rest here a spell," Isaac announced, reining in beside a small copse of cottonwood trees. "Water the horses and ourselves." Grateful for the break, Willa dismounted awkwardly, her legs nearly buckling beneath her. Isaac pretended not to notice, busying himself with untying a canteen from his saddle. "It's beautiful out here," she said, accepting the water he offered. "So open." "That's what drew me to it," he agreed. "Room to breathe, room to build something." "Have you always been a cattle driver?" Isaac sat on a flat rock, stretching his long legs before him. "Started as a ranch hand when I was 16. Learned the trade from the ground up. Driving cattle pays better, though. Lets me save faster." "And your family?" Willa ventured. A shadow crossed his face. "Lost my parents to fever when I was young. Raised by my uncle until he didn't want the burden anymore. Been on my own since I was 15. "I'm sorry," she said softly. He shrugged. "Made me who I am. Self-reliant for better or worse." He turned the question back to her. "What about you? Any family besides your father?" Willa shook her head. "Mother died when I was 12. No siblings. Father was difficult after she passed. Threw himself into the farm and his schemes to expand it. Never worked out the way he hoped. Hard to run a farm alone," Isaac observed. "He wasn't alone. He had me." There was an edge to her voice that surprised even her. "Not that he ever saw me as anything but an extra pair of hands." Isaac studied her for a moment. "Well, I see you as a partner, Willa Parker, and I expect you to speak your mind, especially when I'm being as bullheaded as your father was." The unexpected comparison startled a laugh from her. "Are you often bullheaded, Mr. Jones?" "Isaac," he corrected. And yes, according to most who know me. They continued their journey through the afternoon, talking sporadically about practical matters: the land, the cattle, the work ahead. As the sun began to set, they made camp near the promised creek. Isaac efficiently built a small fire while Willa tended to the horses. "I hope you're not expecting fine cooking," he warned as he pulled provisions from his saddlebags. "Trail food is simple at best." "I can cook," Willa offered. "It's one skill my father made sure I mastered." Isaac handed over the supplies without argument, and soon a basic but flavorful stew bubbled over the fire. They ate in companionable silence, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "Thank you," Willa said suddenly. "Not just for the meal or the partnership, but for—" She hesitated, searching for the right words, "for seeing possibility where I saw only loss." Isaac's eyes reflected the firelight as he looked at her across the flames. "We're both taking a chance here, but sometimes that's all life gives you: a chance. The rest is up to us." They slept on opposite sides of the fire that night, Willa wrapped in a blanket Isaac had provided, her carpetbag serving as a pillow. Despite the hard ground and the strange surroundings, she slept better than she had in months, lulled by the sound of the creek and the distant call of coyotes. The second day of travel brought them through increasingly rugged terrain. By late afternoon, Isaac pointed to a line of trees in the distance. "That's the western edge of the property. Creek runs through there, keeps it green most of the year." As they drew closer, Willa could make out a small cabin nestled against the rise of a hill, sheltered by tall cottonwoods. It was indeed rough, as Isaac had warned: a one-room structure with a stone chimney and a small covered porch. But it stood solid against the landscape, a foothold of civilization in the wilderness. "It's not much to look at," Isaac said, watching her reaction, "but it's a start." "It's more than I had yesterday," Willa replied honestly. They rode past the cabin to a small corral where a handful of cattle grazed. A lean-to shelter stood nearby, housing tools and supplies. Beyond, Willa could see the beginnings of fence lines stretching into the distance. "The nearest neighbor is 5 miles south," Isaac explained as they dismounted. "Old Man Thornton. Decent sort, keeps to himself mostly. Town's a half-day ride to the east, smaller than Fort Davis, but it has the essentials." Willa took it all in: the cabin, the land, the endless sky above. Yesterday she'd had nothing. Today she had everything, just as Isaac had said. Not in material terms, but in possibility. "I'll show you inside," Isaac offered, leading the way to the cabin. The interior was spare but clean. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, with a rough wooden table and 2 chairs nearby. A narrow bed occupied one corner, and shelves held basic provisions. A curtain partitioned off a small area that presumably served as Isaac's private space. "I'll take the lean-to," he said, answering her unspoken question. "Until I can add a proper second room." "I can't put you out of your own home," Willa protested. "It's our home now," he corrected. "And I've slept in worse places. The lean-to is dry and warm enough." She wanted to argue further but recognized the stubborn set of his jaw. "Very well. Temporarily." Isaac showed her where everything was kept, explaining the rhythms of ranch life as they unpacked her few belongings. "Creek water is good for drinking. There's a vegetable patch out back that could use attention. Previous owner started it, but I haven't had time to maintain it properly." Willa nodded, already planning how she would revive the garden. "What about cooking and cleaning? Should we establish a schedule?" "I figured we'd each do what we're best at," Isaac said. "I'm no hand at cooking, as you saw last night, but I can hunt, chop wood, and handle the heavy work." "A fair division," she agreed. They settled into a routine more easily than Willa had expected. Isaac spent his days working on the fence lines and tending the small herd, while Willa brought order to the cabin and coaxed new life from the neglected garden. In the evenings, they shared simple meals and conversation that gradually moved beyond the practical necessities of their arrangement. She learned that Isaac had a dry wit that emerged when he was relaxed. He discovered her fondness for reading and brought back books from his next trip to town. They talked about their hopes for the ranch expanding the herd, adding proper furnishings to the cabin, perhaps building a smokehouse. 2 weeks after their arrival, Isaac announced that he needed to leave on a cattle drive. Promised to help the Thorntons get their herd to the railhead, he explained over breakfast. Should take about 10 days if the weather holds. Willa felt a surprising pang at the thought of his absence. We've only just begun to get the ranch in order. That's why I hired you, remember? His smile took any sting from the words. To keep things running while I'm away. And if there's trouble, Thornton's son will check in every other day, and you know how to use this. He placed his spare revolver on the table between them. Though I hope you won't need to. Willa picked up the weapon cautiously. Her father had taught her to shoot years ago, but it had been some time since she'd held a firearm. I remember the basics. We'll practice before I go, Isaac promised. Just to refresh your memory. That afternoon, he set up targets behind the cabin tin cans on fence posts. Willa's first few shots went wild, but gradually her aim improved. Steady your breathing, Isaac advised, standing close behind her. Take your time between shots. She was acutely aware of his presence, the warmth of him at her back, the timbre of his voice near her ear. It was disconcerting how comfortable she'd become with this man who had been a stranger such a short time ago. Her next shot hit the can squarely, sending it flying. I did it. Never doubted you would, Isaac said, his expression approving. You're a quick study, Willa Parker. The way he said her name sent an unexpected flutter through her stomach. She turned away, reloading the revolver to hide her confusion. Isaac departed 2 days later, riding out at dawn with promises to return as soon as the drive was complete. Willa stood in the doorway of the cabin, watching until he disappeared over the ridge. Alone for the first time since leaving Fort Davis, she felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. This partnership, this fresh start, it all depended on her proving herself capable. She wouldn't let Isaac down, nor herself. The days fell into a pattern. Mornings spent tending to the cattle and the garden, afternoons dedicated to improving the cabin. Young Thornton, a lanky boy of 19 with a shock of red hair, arrived every other day as promised. He was respectful but clearly curious about her arrangement with Isaac. Never figured Jones for taking a partner, he commented during one visit. He's always been the solitary type. Circumstances change, Willa replied simply. For both of us. The boy nodded, not pressing further. Pa says to tell you there's a storm coming. Might want to secure anything that could blow away. The storm hit that night with unexpected ferocity. Rain lashed against the cabin while thunder shook the very foundations. Willa lay awake, listening to the howling wind and worrying about Isaac out on the trail. A crash outside sent her bolt upright. Grabbing the revolver and a lantern, she ventured onto the porch. The wind nearly knocked her off her feet as she scanned the yard. The door to the lean-to had blown open and was slamming repeatedly against the wall. Bracing herself, Willa dashed through the downpour to secure it. As she wrestled with the latch, a movement caught her eye. One of the calves had somehow escaped the corral and was huddled miserably against the side of the structure. Without thinking, she set down the lantern and gun, approaching the frightened animal slowly. "Come now," she coaxed. "Let's get you somewhere dry." The calf bawled pitifully, but allowed her to lead it back to the corral. The gate was still secure. How had it gotten out? Willa inspected the fence and found a section partially collapsed, likely from the force of the wind. Using all her strength, she managed to prop it back in place with a fallen branch. By the time she returned to the cabin, she was soaked through and shivering. She changed into dry clothes and stoked the fire, huddling close to the flames until warmth returned to her limbs. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but a sense of accomplishment warmed her from within. She had faced her first crisis alone and handled it. The storm passed by morning, leaving behind a freshly washed landscape and considerable damage. Willa spent the day repairing what she could: the fallen section of fence, a corner of the garden that had washed away, scattered tools and supplies. Young Thornton arrived mid-morning, looking impressed at her efforts. Jones would be proud, he said, helping her right an overturned water barrel. Not many would tackle all this alone. I'm not alone, Willa replied without thinking. This is a partnership. The boy gave her an odd look, but said nothing more. Days stretched into a week, and Willa found herself watching the horizon each evening, hoping to see a familiar figure approaching. She told herself it was merely concern for her business partner, nothing more. On the 8th day after Isaac's departure, she was hanging laundry to dry when the sound of approaching hooves made her heart leap. But it wasn't Isaac who rode into the yard, it was a stranger, a heavy-set man with a pockmarked face and small, calculating eyes. "Afternoon, madam," he called, tipping his hat with exaggerated politeness. Looking for Isaac Jones, Willa kept the clothesline between them, instinctively wary. "He's away on business. I'm his partner, Willa Parker." The man's eyebrows rose. "Partner, is it? Interesting." He dismounted, taking a step toward her. "Name's Mercer, Silas Mercer. Jones and I have some unfinished business." "What sort of business?" Willa asked, edging toward the cabin where the revolver waited. Mercer smiled, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "Financial matter. He owes me money." "I'm not aware of any debts," Willa replied carefully. "Mr. Jones handles his obligations responsibly." The man snorted. "That what he told you?" "Jones ran out on a poker debt, $500 worth." It was an outrageous sum, and Willa's skepticism must have shown on her face. "Don't believe me." Mercer pulled a folded paper from his vest pocket. "Got it in writing. His signature right there." Willa didn't move to take the paper. "If what you say is true, you'll need to return when Mr. Jones is here." Mercer's affable manner disappeared. "Listen, lady. I've been tracking him for months. I aim to collect what's owed me one way or another." His hand drifted to his hip, where a revolver hung in a worn leather holster. Willa's mouth went dry. "There's nothing of value here," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "As you can see, we're just starting out." "Those cattle look valuable enough," Mercer countered. "I'll take them as payment." "Those cattle are part of a legitimate business. They're not available." Mercer took another step forward. "I don't think you understand your situation, madam." "I'm not asking." Willa backed up until she felt the cabin door behind her. She had two choices: flee inside for the gun or stand her ground. She chose the latter. "Mr. Mercer, I suggest you leave now. The Thorntons check on this property regularly, and they're due any moment." It was a bluff, but a calculated one. The man hesitated, glancing toward the road. "I'll be back with the sheriff," he threatened. "By all means," Willa replied, finding courage in her rising anger. "We welcome the law here." Mercer stared at her for a long moment, then spat on the ground. "Tell Jones I'm not finished with him." He mounted his horse and rode away, but Willa remained tense long after he disappeared from view. As soon as she was certain he was gone, she rushed inside for the revolver, then ran to the corral to count the cattle. All present, thankfully. That night, she barred the cabin door and kept the gun close at hand. Sleep eluded her as questions churned in her mind. Was Mercer telling the truth? Did Isaac have gambling debts he hadn't disclosed? It seemed at odds with the responsible, forthright man she'd come to know. Yet the stranger had been convincingly specific. 3 more anxious days passed without sign of either Mercer or Isaac. Willa jumped at every sound, divided between worry for Isaac's safety and fear of Mercer's return. Young Thornton noticed her unease, but attributed it to natural concern for her absent partner. On the morning of the 12th day, Willa was feeding the chickens when a familiar figure crested the ridge. Relief flooded through her at the sight of Isaac riding toward the ranch, apparently unharmed. She set down the feed bucket and walked to meet him, trying to temper her joy with the wariness that Mercer's visit had instilled. Isaac's face lit up when he saw her, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Ranch is still standing, I see," he called as he drew near. "Never doubted you for a minute." Willa couldn't help returning his smile despite her misgivings. "Welcome back. The drive went well, without a hitch." He dismounted, leading his horse toward the corral. "And here, any troubles?" She hesitated, then decided directness was best. "We had a visitor, a man named Mercer." Isaac stopped abruptly, his expression darkening. "Silas Mercer? Here. He said you owe him money from a poker game, a significant amount." Isaac ran a hand through his hair, looking more weary than guilty. "When was this?" "3 days ago. He threatened to take the cattle in payment." Anger flashed in Isaac's eyes. "He threatened you, not directly," Willa qualified, "but his intentions were clear." Isaac secured his horse, then gestured toward the cabin. "Let's talk inside." Once they were seated at the table, Isaac took a deep breath. "Mercer's claim is partially true. There was a poker game about a year ago in Valentine. I won a considerable sum from him legitimately. He accused me of cheating and demanded his money back." "And did you cheat, I mean?" "No," Isaac said firmly. "I've never needed to cheat at cards. Mercer's a sore loser with a reputation for violence. I left town rather than face his justice." Willa studied his face, searching for any sign of deception. "He had a paper with your signature. Forged, most likely, or something I signed under duress before I got away." Isaac leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Willa, I should have warned you about him. That was my mistake. But I swear to you I don't owe that man a cent." She wanted to believe him. Everything in her experience with Isaac told her he was honorable, yet doubt lingered. "He said he'd return. Possibly with the sheriff." "He won't bring any law," Isaac said with certainty. "Mercer operates outside it, but he might come back." He reached across the table, hesitating before covering her hand with his own. "I'm sorry I wasn't here to protect you." The warmth of his touch sent an unexpected thrill through her. "I managed," she said, pulling her hand away and standing up. "The question now is what we do if he returns." Isaac rose as well. "We face him together, and in the meantime we prepare." The next few days were dedicated to reinforcing the ranch's defenses. Isaac repaired and strengthened the corral, ensuring the cattle couldn't be easily stolen. He taught Willa more about handling the revolver, and together they established protocols for what to do if Mercer or his associates appeared. Through it all, Willa watched Isaac closely, looking for any sign that he might be concealing something from her. She found none. Instead, she saw a man committed to protecting what they were building together. "Why didn't you tell me about Mercer before?" she asked one evening as they sat on the porch, enjoying the cool night air after a long day's work. Isaac was quiet for a moment. Pride partly. "It's not a chapter I'm proud of, and I honestly thought he'd given up the chase. It's been months with no sign of him." "What were you doing in a high-stakes poker game in the first place?" he smiled ruefully. "Looking for a shortcut." "I needed money to buy more cattle to make this place viable faster. Thought I could win it instead of earning it the slow way." "Did you?" Willa was curious despite herself. One enough to buy the first 10 head, he admitted, but learned a lesson about shortcuts that nearly cost me more than money. His honesty was disarming. Willa found her lingering doubts fading as she considered how forthright he'd been since she confronted him. "Thank you for telling me the truth." "Partners don't lie to each other," Isaac said simply. "Not if the partnership is to survive." A comfortable silence fell between them. Stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack. Willa felt a contentment she hadn't experienced since before her father's death, perhaps even longer. "I missed this place," Isaac said softly. "And you." The admission hung in the air between them, fraught with meaning neither was ready to examine. Willa looked at him, this man who had offered her everything when she had nothing, and felt something shift inside her. "The ranch missed you too," she replied, not quite ready to say more. 2 weeks passed without sign of Mercer, and life at the ranch settled back into its rhythm. Spring was giving way to summer, bringing longer days perfect for the work that needed doing. The garden flourished under Willa's care, providing fresh vegetables for their table. Isaac finished the fence line on the north boundary and began planning an expansion of the cabin. "Thought we might add a proper bedroom for you," he said one morning over breakfast, "and expand this main room a bit, maybe add some windows for more light." Willa looked around the cabin that had become her home. It would be nice to have more space, and perhaps a separate area for cooking. "Consider it done," Isaac grinned. "I'll ride to town today for supplies. Make a list of anything you need." While he was gone, Willa took stock of how far they'd come in such a short time. The ranch was taking shape before her eyes, transforming from a rough outpost into a true home. And somewhere along the way, her feelings for Isaac had transformed as well. It wasn't just gratitude anymore. Nor was it merely respect for his work ethic or admiration for his resilience. There was something deeper growing, something that made her pulse quicken when he entered a room or smiled in that particular way he reserved only for her. "Foolish," she murmured to herself as she kneaded dough for the evening's bread. He offered partnership, not courtship. Yet she couldn't help wondering if he felt it too, the subtle shift in the air between them, the lingering glances, the growing ease of their companionship. Isaac returned late in the afternoon, his horse laden with supplies. "Town was busier than expected," he explained as he unloaded boards and tools. "Cattle buyers passing through. Good news for us when the time comes to sell." He seemed energized, full of plans and possibilities. "I spoke with the carpenter about some design ideas for the addition. He gave me some sketches." Isaac pulled folded papers from his saddlebag. "Thought you might want to look them over, see if they suit you." Willa was touched by his consideration. "I'd like that." As they pored over the sketches together, heads bent close over the table, Willa was intensely aware of Isaac's proximity, the clean scent of him, the warmth radiating from his sun-bronzed skin. "This layout works well," she said, pointing to one drawing. "Though I wonder if the kitchen might be better positioned here to catch the morning light." Isaac studied the sketch. "Good thinking. I'll make the changes." His hand brushed hers as he reached for the paper, and neither of them pulled away immediately. When he finally spoke again, his voice was different, lower, more hesitant. "Willa, there's something I've been wanting to ask you," her heart stuttered. "Yes." Before he could continue, the sound of approaching riders interrupted the moment. Isaac was on his feet instantly, moving to the window. His posture stiffened. "Mercer," he said grimly, "and he's not alone." Willa joined him at the window. 3 riders were approaching Mercer in the lead, flanked by 2 rough-looking men. "Get the revolver," Isaac instructed, reaching for his own weapon. "Stay inside if you can, but be ready." Fear and determination warred within her as she retrieved the gun. This was their home, their future. She wouldn't surrender it easily. Isaac stepped onto the porch as the riders drew up to the cabin. Willa positioned herself just inside the doorway, revolver ready but hidden from view. "Mercer," Isaac acknowledged coolly, "didn't expect to see you again." The heavy-set man smirked. "Thought you could hide out here forever, Jones. Time to settle your debt." "There is no debt," Isaac replied, "unless you count what you owe me for the trouble you've caused." Mercer's face darkened. "I've been more than patient. Now I'm taking what's mine with interest." He gestured to his companions. "Boys, round up those cattle." Isaac's hand hovered near his holster. "I wouldn't advise that. 1 man against 3, Mercer laughed. "Poor odds, Jones." 2 against 3, Willa corrected, stepping onto the porch beside Isaac, her revolver visible now. "Still poor odds for you." Surprise flickered across Mercer's face before his expression hardened. "The lady's got spirit. Won't help when bullets start flying." "Last chance to ride away," Isaac warned. "Next time you come on our property uninvited, we won't be asking politely." Tension crackled in the air as Mercer assessed the situation. His companions looked increasingly uneasy, clearly not having anticipated armed resistance. "This isn't over," Mercer finally growled, but there was less conviction in his threat. "It is for today," Isaac replied evenly. With a final venomous glare, Mercer wheeled his horse around. His companions followed, casting nervous glances over their shoulders. Willa and Isaac remained on the porch, weapons ready, until the riders disappeared from sight. Only then did Willa realize she'd been holding her breath. "That was brave," Isaac said, holstering his revolver. "Standing with me like that." "Partners face trouble together," she reminded him, echoing his own words. "Besides, I've grown rather attached to this place." The admiration in his eyes made her flush. "Mercer won't give up easily," he cautioned. "He'll be back." "And we'll be ready," Willa said with more confidence than she felt. "Together." That night neither of them slept much. Isaac insisted on taking the first watch, promising to wake Willa for the second shift. She lay on her bed, listening to his quiet movements as he checked windows and doors. When he finally came to rouse her for her turn, she was already awake. "Sorry," he whispered. "Didn't mean to disturb you earlier." "I wasn't sleeping anyway," she admitted, sitting up. "Too much on my mind." Isaac hesitated in the doorway. "What I was going to ask you earlier before Mercer arrived." Willa's pulse quickened. "Yes, it can wait until morning," he decided. "You should rest while you can." Disappointment mingled with anticipation as she nodded. "Good night, Isaac." "Good night, Willa." Morning brought no sign of Mercer, but they remained vigilant. Isaac rode to the Thornton ranch to alert them to the potential threat, while Willa continued work on the garden, the revolver never far from reach. When Isaac returned, he carried news. "Thornton's gathering some of the neighboring ranchers. They've had trouble with Mercer, too. They're forming a committee to deal with him once and for all." A vigilance committee. Willa had heard of such things, ranchers banding together to handle threats when the law was too distant or ineffective. "Of sorts," Isaac confirmed. "More a show of strength. Mercer preys on isolated targets. He'll think twice about challenging a united front." The knowledge that they weren't alone in their stand against Mercer brought Willa some comfort. "When will they meet?" 2 days from now. "In the meantime, we keep watch." That night, as they shared a simple supper, Willa broached the subject that had been nagging at her. "What were you going to ask me yesterday, before we were interrupted?" Isaac set down his fork, suddenly looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "It might not be the right time with Mercer still out there." "I'd still like to know." He met her gaze directly. "I was going to ask if you'd consider making our arrangement more permanent." Willa's heart skipped. "The partnership is already formalized." "Not the business partnership," Isaac clarified. "Us, you and me." He took a deep breath. These past weeks, working alongside you, building something together. It's shown me what I want for my future, and that future includes you, Willa, not just as a business partner. Joy bloomed within her, sudden and overwhelming. Are you proposing? Inelegantly, but yes. A smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. I know it's fast, maybe too fast, but when you've spent as much time alone as I have, you recognize something real when you find it. Willa thought of the path that had led her here, the loss of her home, the desperate choice to follow this man into the unknown. What had begun as necessity had transformed into something she hadn't dared hope for. Love. It is fast, she agreed. And yet, somehow, it doesn't feel rushed at all. Hope kindled in Isaac's eyes. Is that a yes? It's a I think we should wait until after we've dealt with Mercer, Willa replied practically, though her smile belied her measured words. But my inclination is decidedly affirmative. Isaac laughed, the sound rich with relief and happiness. Always the sensible one. Very well, we'll handle Mercer first, but I'm holding you to that inclination. The next day passed in a strange combination of tension and joy. They continued their vigilance against Mercer's return while stealing glances at each other like lovesick youngsters. Isaac worked on the cabin addition with renewed vigor, and Willa found herself humming as she went about her chores. By evening, there was still no sign of trouble. They sat together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Beautiful, Willa murmured. Yes, you are, Isaac replied, his gaze fixed not on the sunset but on her. She laughed, nudging his shoulder with her own. That was terrible, but sincere. He captured her hand in his thumb tracing circles on her palm. I never expected this, you know. When I offered you that partnership in Fort Davis, I was thinking practically. A mutually beneficial arrangement. And now I can't imagine this place or my life without you in it. Willa leaned against him, allowing herself to savor this moment of peace. I was so angry that day at my father, at the bank, at the world. I thought I'd lost everything worth having. And I told you that we'd start with everything, she finished for him. You were right, though I didn't understand it then. Isaac put his arm around her shoulders, drawing her closer. We still have everything to build, Willa. A home, a successful ranch, a family someday if that's what you want. It is, she said softly. All of it. The sound of approaching horses shattered the moment. Isaac was on his feet instantly, hand going to his holster. Willa stood beside him, squinting into the gathering dusk. It's Thornton, Isaac said with relief as the riders came into view. And others. 5 men rode into the yard, led by Old Man Thornton himself. They dismounted, greeting Isaac with nods of respect. Evening, Jones. Miss Parker. Thornton removed his hat. Sorry to disturb you, but we've had news of Mercer. Isaac tensed. What kind of news? He's gathering men in Valentine, planning something big from what our source says. How many men? Willa asked. 8, maybe 10. Thornton looked grim. We're warning everyone in the area. The committee's meeting tonight instead of tomorrow. Thought you'd want to join us. Isaac glanced at Willa, conflict evident in his expression. He clearly didn't want to leave her alone, but his presence at the meeting was important. I'll be fine, she assured him, reading his thoughts. The cabin is secure, and I know how to use the revolver. We can leave one of our men here, Thornton offered. Isaac considered, then nodded. That would ease my mind. A young rancher named Cooper volunteered to stay. After securing the horses and gathering supplies, the rest of the men prepared to depart. Before mounting, Isaac pulled Willa aside. I don't like leaving you, especially now. I understand why you must go. She straightened his collar, a strangely intimate gesture that felt entirely natural. Be careful, always. He hesitated, then leaned down to press a quick, firm kiss to her lips. For luck, he explained with a smile that made her heart race. Willa watched them ride away, a mix of anxiety and determination settling in her chest. Cooper, a quiet man with kind eyes, kept a respectful distance as she returned to the cabin. "I'll keep watch out here, madam," he assured her. "No one will get past me." Willa thanked him, then set about preparing for a potential siege. She filled containers with water, checked the ammunition for both revolvers, and positioned furniture to create barriers if needed. Night deepened, and Willa found herself too restless to sleep. She joined Cooper on the porch, bringing him coffee and sitting beside him in companionable silence. "How long have you known Isaac?" she asked eventually. Cooper smiled. "Few years now. Good man, honest to a fault. And Mercer? Have you encountered him before?" The rancher's expression darkened. "Once. He tried to extort protection money from my brother's place last year. When my brother refused, his barn mysteriously caught fire." Willa shivered. "He sounds dangerous." "He is. That's why we're finally taking a stand. Men like Mercer thrive because good folks stay silent." Cooper sipped his coffee. "Begging your pardon, madam, but Jones is lucky to have found you. Not many women would have the courage to face down a man like Mercer." "Not many women have as much to lose," Willa replied. "Or as much to gain by standing firm." They lapsed back into silence, the night sounds of the ranch crickets, distant coyotes, the occasional low of cattle creating a deceptively peaceful backdrop. It was nearly midnight when Cooper suddenly stiffened, peering into the darkness. "Movement," he whispered. "By the corral." Willa's hand went to the revolver in her pocket. "How many? Can't tell yet. Stay inside, madam." But Willa had no intention of hiding. This was her home too, and she would defend it. She stepped back into the shadows of the porch, weapon ready, as Cooper moved to a better vantage point. The sound of breaking glass from the back of the cabin made them both whirl around. A diversion. Willa realized someone trying to draw their attention to the corral while others approached from behind. "Fire!" Cooper shouted, pointing to a flicker of orange light near the lean-to. "They're trying to smoke us out." Willa dashed inside for the bucket of water she'd prepared, racing to the back of the cabin. A small fire had been set against the wooden structure, already beginning to catch. She doused it quickly, scanning the darkness for the arsonist. A shadow moved to her left. Without hesitation, Willa fired her revolver in warning. "Next one won't miss," she called out. Gunfire erupted from the front of the cabin, Cooper exchanging shots with unseen attackers. Willa pressed her back against the cabin wall, trying to determine how many assailants they faced. "Miss Parker." Cooper's voice urgent. "Get inside." She edged toward the corner, intending to return to the front porch when a rough hand clamped over her mouth from behind. A strong arm pinned her own arms to her sides. "Drop the gun," a voice hissed in her ear. "Or I drop you." Willa let the revolver fall, but her submission was a feint. The moment the pressure on her arms lessened, she drove her elbow backward with all her strength, connecting with her captor's ribs. The man grunted in pain, his grip loosening just enough for her to twist away. She scrambled toward the fallen revolver, but her attacker recovered quickly, lunging for her. They grappled in the dirt, Willa fighting with a ferocity born of desperation. Her fingers found a rock, and she swung it with all her might, connecting with the man's temple. He collapsed atop her, unconscious or worse. Shoving him aside, Willa reclaimed the revolver and ran to the front of the cabin. Cooper was crouched behind a water barrel, exchanging fire with at least 2 assailants hidden in the darkness. 3 more by the corral, he reported tersely. "They're after the cattle. And Mercer? Haven't spotted him yet." A bullet splintered the porch railing inches from Willa's head. She ducked, heart pounding, then steadied herself and returned fire. The standoff continued for what felt like hours but was likely only minutes. Then, suddenly, new voices joined the fray shouting orders, demanding surrender. "It's Jones!" Cooper exclaimed. "And the committee!" Relief flooded through Willa as she recognized Isaac's voice among those calling out commands. The gunfire ceased abruptly, replaced by the sounds of struggle and men being restrained. "Willa!" Isaac's frantic call cut through the chaos. "Willa, answer me!" "Here," she shouted back, stepping onto the porch. "I'm unharmed." Isaac appeared out of the darkness, his face etched with worry and relief. He crossed the yard in long strides, gathering her into his arms with such force that it nearly knocked the breath from her lungs. "When we heard the shots," his voice was rough with emotion, "I thought I'd lost you." Willa clung to him, suddenly aware of how close they'd come to disaster. "There's one unconscious behind the cabin," she reported, professional despite the trembling in her limbs. "I hit him with a rock." Isaac drew back to look at her, amazement replacing fear in his eyes. "Remind me never to underestimate you, Willa Parker." The aftermath was chaotic but controlled. The Vigilance Committee had captured 5 of Mercer's men, including the one Willa had incapacitated. Mercer himself had escaped in the confusion, but with his gang disbanded, his threat was significantly diminished. "He won't show his face in this territory again," Thornton assured them as the prisoners were loaded onto horses for transport to the nearest sheriff. Not with every rancher for 50 miles on alert. By dawn, the ranch was quiet once more, though evidence of the attack remained: bullet holes in the cabin walls, scorch marks on the lean-to, churned earth where struggles had taken place. Isaac and Willa stood surveying the damage as the committee departed with their prisoners. "It could have been worse," Isaac observed, his arm secure around Willa's waist. "Much worse." "We'll repair it," she said with certainty. "Together." He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "About that inclination you mentioned." Despite her exhaustion, Willa smiled. "I believe it strengthened into a definite affirmative." Isaac's answering smile was brilliant in the early morning light. "Is that a yes, Willa Parker?" "Will you marry me?" "Yes," she replied simply. "Yes to all of it, the ranch, the future you, everything." His kiss was gentle at first, then deepening with promise and passion as she responded in kind. When they finally parted, both breathless, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said softly. "Have since that day on your father's porch, I think, stubborn woman with fire in her eyes, refusing to be beaten even when she'd lost everything." "I hadn't lost everything," Willa corrected him. "I just didn't know yet what I'd found." The wedding took place 3 weeks later, a simple ceremony performed by a traveling preacher with the Thorntons and other neighboring ranchers in attendance. Willa wore a new dress of pale blue, with wildflowers in her hair. Isaac, clean-shaven and solemn, stumbled over his vows in a way that endeared him to her all the more. "Not the most eloquent groom," he apologized afterward as they greeted their well-wishers. "But sincere," Willa replied, echoing his words from days before. "That matters more." They celebrated with a feast spread under the cottonwoods, music provided by a fiddler from a nearby ranch. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the land that was now truly theirs together, Isaac led Willa away from the festivities to a small rise overlooking the property. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. "A wedding gift." He placed a small velvet pouch in her palm. Inside, Willa found a delicate gold ring set with a single pearl. "It was my mother's," Isaac explained as he slipped it onto her finger beside the simple gold band they'd exchanged during the ceremony. "The only thing I have left of her. I've carried it with me all these years, waiting for the right person to give it to." Tears pricked at Willa's eyes. "It's beautiful. Thank you." "Thank you," he countered, "for giving me a reason to put down roots, for making this place a home." They stood together as twilight deepened, surveying the land that had become the foundation of their shared future. The cabin, now expanded with the promised addition. The corral, sturdier than before, the garden, lush with summer's bounty. "When the bank took everything," Willa mused, "I thought it was the end. I couldn't see how anything good could come from such loss. And now," Isaac's arm tightened around her waist, "now I see it was just the beginning." She turned in his embrace, raising her face to his. The beginning of everything. His kiss was a promise, sealed beneath the vast Texas sky. In the years that followed, the Jones ranch prospered. The small herd grew steadily, eventually numbering over 200 head. The cabin expanded again, then again, evolving into a proper ranch house with separate bedrooms for the children who arrived. First a son, Samuel, with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determination. Then twin daughters, Elizabeth and Grace, who brought both joy and chaos in equal measure. Mercer never returned, though they heard rumors of him operating in territories farther west. Eventually, even those rumors faded, and with them, the last shadows of their early struggles. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, Isaac surprised Willa with a final addition to the house, a library, with floor-to-ceiling shelves and comfortable chairs by the window. "For all those books you keep ordering from the catalog," he explained as she explored the space with wonder. "Thought you deserved a proper place to enjoy them." "It's perfect," she breathed, running her fingers along the empty shelves, already imagining them filled. "Absolutely perfect." Isaac watched her with the same admiration that had been in his eyes from the beginning. "Not bad for two people who started with nothing." "We never started with nothing," Willa corrected him, crossing to where he stood and wrapping her arms around his waist. "We started with everything that mattered: courage, determination, faith in each other. And love," he added, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Don't forget that part." "Never," Willa promised, standing on tiptoe to properly claim his lips. "That's the part I remember every day." Outside, their children's laughter rang across the ranch yard. Inside, their home stood solid and welcoming, built by their own hands. And between them, the love that had sparked when they had nothing continued to burn bright, illuminating a future filled with everything they'd ever dreamed of, and more.